We are live in pre-show. Hi, guys. Got Chuck with us. Chuck is, how would I describe Chuck? Chuck is today's victim. No, I'm teasing. Chuck has been kind enough to come on and discuss this topic with me. So we've got Amnon. Amnon is in North Carolina. Chris Sabata, Dave Edwards from California, Indrik Vidrit from Nepal. Did you know that Nepal has a time zone that is a half an hour off from the adjacent time zones? Isn't that odd?
It's like Mumbai. Mumbai is a half hour too.
Oh, there you go. Rod in the UK, Bruce Turner in Virginia, Frank Bees, Dave, Ted, Kenny, and then there are other folks too that are watching that are not in chat. Oh my gosh. Guys, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get the Twitter and Periscope stream going here in just a second, I would invite you over to easternshorebroadcasting.com, click the Watch Live tab, and that's where the chat is. So folks will be talking back and forth during Chuck's and my discussion today, and people will be asking questions and voicing their own opinions. And then in the post-show, we'll try to address some of your questions. We may do it during the show if we run out of good things to say. I doubt if that'll be the case today, though. So come over to www.easternshorebroadcasting.com. Wait, hold on a second. I'm getting a call.
Sorry.
Okay. Mute that rascal. So welcome to have you over there, Facebook viewers. We're not going to be monitoring the chat in Facebook today. We will, I promise I will take a look at those after the show. But if you have something pertinent to say and you want us to see it during the live show, you need to get to easternshorebroadcasting.com, click the Watch Live tab, and you get to watch live. Yeah, watch live. Okay, very good. Ted says he seems to be logged in with 2 different accounts, depending on which device he's trying to type to. Yeah, Ted, that happens sometimes. That used to happen with Jan and Marie. They would be in the same room. She would be on her laptop. He would be on his. And then when one of them would leave the room, the other one would go over and and put in comments under the other one's name. I thought it was pretty funny. All right. Bruce, welcome. How are things in Lynchburg, Virginia? I was just up there a couple of weeks ago for Thanksgiving. And then a week after that, too. And Dave Edwards, what's a good word going on out in sunny California? Dave, I wonder if you and Chuck are at all close to each other. Chuck's in the, is it Thousand Oaks? Is that it, Chuck? The Thousand Oaks area?
Yes, that's northwest of Los Angeles by about 45 minutes to an hour out the 101 freeway.
I was talking with somebody this morning that has played golf. Apparently there's a pretty famous golf course up there near you somewhere where Tiger Woods
this place
does his...
is surrounded by golf courses,
yeah.
which I've
and
never
they're all
done
famous. Brandon Adams is here. Welcome, Brandon. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're supposed to get started here momentarily. We got a minute left.
Trying to adjust the lights and gaff the room, and I've got suddenly all this light coming in.
Yep.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Yep. It's natural. It's natural light. Yep. Lighting is the thing, especially with a green screen. Golly, lighting is so important with a green screen. Folks will send me pictures and say, what's wrong with my camera? Well, it's not your camera. It's your lighting. Oh.
How many lights do you have going in that room?
Oh, a ton.
Tom?
6, 8, 9, 10.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It looks very nice.
Thank you.
Looks great.
Thank you. My favorite light is the light behind me. It's above my head, and you can actually see it kind of go away as I put my hand over there. That kind of gives me just a little bit of shine on the top. And it helps, of course, separate my shoulders from the green behind me, so that's good. Blaze is here. Welcome, Blaze. Tommy's here. Tommy's right up the road from me in Tallahassee, Alabama. So we've got folks literally from all over the world, all over the country, and all over the state. All right. Well, for the last time, folks, and I'll probably say it one more time at least. If you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, come on over to easternshorebroadcasting.com so you can get in on the chat room. Because the chat room, do I have a picture of the chat room somewhere? Sometimes I used to. Can't find it easily. Anyway, the chat room is where all the activity goes on. John Thompson has just logged into the chat room from Scotland. E10 Mayer has just logged in from South Africa. And Tommy Willis has just logged in from Alabama. So that gives you an idea of the widespread nature of this crowd. So we're glad to have every one of you. And let's get started. Chuck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute you. And then I'm going to, in fact, let me just double check that my mute button works on you. Nope, it doesn't. So let me fix my mute button. And shortcut, add, find, mute Chuck. Function is going to be audio off, and input is going to be, where is Chuck? Nope, that's not it. There you are. Okay, let's see if this works. And so that should be Chuck off. Yeah, and Chuck on. All right. All right, Chuck, so off you go. And Ray's watching from a parking lot. Ted's in Sacramento. Rich Ignacio, that troublemaker, is from home. All right, so it's a crazy crowd today. Chuck, I make no promises on this group. I really do. No promises at all. They are wild and uncontrollable. But I will tell you guys, you need to behave, because if you don't behave, that's it. You're toast. You're out of here, at least for this week. Because I understand our subject is a little, not everybody agrees on the subject, and some people feel very strongly on it. So as you debate back and forth in the chat room, I really do insist that you have respect for each other, that you treat each other well, and if you don't, literally, you're gone for the week. And you can come back again next week when you recover. Okay. All right. Rich says he's neutral on this issue. Well, okay. All right. So we're going to mute Chuck. We're going to fade to black, and we're going to get going. Oh, whoa, sorry about that. Hey, welcome. I'm Tom Sinclair. I was just getting ready for today's show, getting warmed up. The great debate. That's right, the great debate. You have joined, maybe you didn't do it on purpose, but you're here with us today on Streaming Idiots. And I'm so glad you're here. It's going to be a really interesting show. It's kind of the first time we've ever done anything in sort of a debate format, so we may never, ever do it again. But we thought we'd give it a try. I welcome you if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or Periscope. I'm so delighted to have you here. And I would invite you to come on over to easternshorebroadcasting.com, because there is where you can get in on the chat room. And a lot of folks will be talking back and forth. I see my friend Michael just showed up in chat. And That way you can get in on asking questions, responding to what we're talking about, responding to what other people are saying in chat. And then, of course, in the post show after the show today, we'll be taking questions from you guys and kind of, bouncing off some of your comments. I do encourage you, I encourage you to behave, treat each other with respect. Let's be examples to the rest of the world, how we can have differing opinions, but still treat each other with respect and affection, because, we're all stuck on the same planet together. So let's make it work somehow. And we're going to get more into that subject in just a second. But I do have an exciting announcement. For those of you that had heard about the live streaming rookies class that we offered in November and December, it was a great success. Our first class was Introduction to Live Streaming. And if you're thinking, wow, I'm sorry I missed that. Well, we're offering it again in January. It's in our store at easternshorebroadcasting.com. And you can get in it. It's a great class. It runs 6 weeks on Tuesday evenings, and you can come back and watch the presentations anytime. We have a special, what I think in Facebook it's called a secret group. Yes, we have a secret group set up for live streaming rookies. So in the secret group, we'll have all the video from all our presentations there, as well as all the members of the class get to be members of the group. And so you can discuss things after the class too, if you want to. It'll be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about some of it is vMix centric, but a lot of it is just kind of generic material that you need to know about live streaming, about what are CDNs and how do cameras connect and how important is audio and those kinds of things. Kind of an overview of the whole live streaming world. So if you feel like you've got pieces of the puzzle but you haven't seen the whole puzzle yet, you may want to take that class. It's $99. It's 6 weeks, and I would encourage you to do that. You can also give it to a friend for Christmas. So, what else can we do that? Oh, the other thing coming up on Live Streaming Rookies is we're going to be offering a sales and marketing class. If you were in our live streaming, what is it called? It's called Streaming Idiots. Oh, yeah, there it is, right down there at the bottom. The Facebook group. Streaming Idiots. If you're in that group and saw some of the discussions recently about sales and marketing and folks that have lots of knowledge being willing to share and other folks that are still learning, needing that knowledge, if you want to go one place to get it all one time, we'll be offering again a 6-week class on sales and marketing of live streaming, of webcasting, of whatever we want to call whatever it is we're doing. We'll teach you how to sell that so that you can get paid to do it. Better to be paid to do it than do it for free, I think, or to have to pay to do it yourself. That's the definition of a hobby, I think, is when you do something you love and you pay for it. That's a hobby. So you can make it a professional hobby, which means you actually get paid for it, or you can make it a profession where you really get paid for it. So that's going to be coming up on Live Streaming Rookies. You can get more information on the intro class at easternshorebroadcasting.com right now, and join our Facebook group, Streaming Idiots, to keep up with all the latest on what's going on right now. Bill Connor is saying in chat that he has attended the class. Bill actually passed the class. Surprised some of us. Just teasing, Bill, just teasing. Well, I am delighted to have a guest on the show today to discuss with me the issue of net neutrality. Now, if you've been living under a rock and don't know what net neutrality is, we will introduce the subject together, he and I. But let me bring in my guest and unmute his microphone. Welcome, Chuck Braverman. Glad to have you.
Hi, it's great to be here, Tom.
And we have audio. Oh, this is great. This is like almost it works. Now, Chuck has got an amazing background. He has been nominated for all sorts of filmmaking awards. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's traveled the world doing this kind of stuff. And Chuck, we are just so honored to have you take time out today to come in and talk about this, because I know this is a subject that is near and dear to your heart, and you and I have chatted about it kind of briefly. And I thought this would be a great I mean, two things that I've got going here. Let me get my agenda off my chest, and then we can talk. One is, of course, the issue at hand, net neutrality, and let's dive into that. But the other is the whole idea that people that may not agree, in fact, might be completely opposite sides of the same polar opposite on the same point, that they can coexist, that they can be friends, that they can respect each other and listen to each other's points and try to understand instead of just hammering away each other like we see so many times on some of these news shows. And so I thought this would be a great example. This is a good subject matter because it can be somewhat polarizing. But it's a good subject matter, but it's also a good example of how two humans, I mean, we're both stuck on this earth, how we can disagree and live happily ever after. So that's my little kind of intro to this. My chat keeps wanting me to reconnect. That's odd. Yeah, sorry about that. So Chuck, net neutrality. Let me lay out what little I know about it, and then we'll kind of let you respond. Net neutrality was enacted by the Federal Communications Commission in 2015 to ensure that all internet traffic was treated equally as it went over the internet. And that's the basic understanding that I have of net neutrality. And then just recently, this year, last week perhaps, the Federal Communications Commission voted to rescind that rule, so that now that rule is no longer in effect. Chuck, build on that and tell me your understanding of net neutrality.
Well, first I'd like to say thanks for having me on the show. I've been watching your show and others and trying to get up to speed on streaming. When you asked me before, what did you want to put on the title, I said streaming newbie, because I've done actually exactly one show to date, but I'm planning on going on a every other week basis on this show, Westock Online. But so my background is a filmmaker. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a lobbyist. But I was very surprised when watching your show, and I posted something on, your chat room about, net neutrality. And I realized at that point that nobody had been talking about it here. And if there's any place on the internet where net neutrality should have been discussed at length, it's right here on this show. And because everybody that's watching this show, I think, has a stake in net neutrality. So having said that, and that I'm not an expert, I would like to just read a sentence or two of what the definition of net neutrality is. And of course, bells are going off as I say that. Net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers must treat all data on the internet the same and not discriminate or charge differently by user, content, website, platform application, type of attached equipment, or method of communication. For instance, under these principles, internet service providers are unable to intentionally block, slow down, or charge money for specific websites and online content. So if there, you can say this is political and it's not political, and it doesn't matter whether you're left or right or blue or red. It seems to me that everybody that is in this group, unless you own an internet service provider, unless you're Comcast or Spectrum or Time Warner, one of those guys providing ISP service, I can't fathom why you would be in favor of repeal of net neutrality, because this is going to affect you, Tom Sinclair, and Frank B that's watching and that's logged in, and everybody else that is watching this that's trying to make a living or just do it for their stream for their church for nothing. You're going to see with the repeal of net neutrality, I predict, the slow creeping changes. This is not going to happen next week. It's not going to happen next month. It's going to slowly creep up, and little by little, Verizon is going to start charging you more money to stream from anywhere. Your high school football game, your girls basketball, or whatever it is, it's going to cost you more money. And now they can do it, and they can get away with it. They can charge you whatever they want. They don't even have to let you stream. If they don't like your church or your high school football team, they could say, you know what? We decided we just don't want to let you. So the whole idea of net neutrality is to take this tremendous platform that we have and have everybody treated equally. And why, I would love to know, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter to you. You should be in favor of net neutrality, and you should be outraged, I think, because this is a choice that has been made in favor of corporations, big corporations, that are controlling what has become an essential utility for all of us. It's like the air we breathe, the water that we have, the gasoline that we put in our cars, the highways we drive down. What if the highway department said, if you're Walmart and Amazon, we're going to allow you to go 80 miles an hour down the highway to deliver your packages. But if you're Tom Sinclair, or Chuck Braverman, and you just got a little shop, you have to go 30 miles an hour, or maybe you can't even be on the highway. And that's what's happening by the repeal of net neutrality. And I'm kind of stunned and outraged that all of us in this group in particular aren't jumping up and down and saying, hey, this is wrong. Net neutrality is a good thing for us, and it's a good thing for people in general. So I'm certainly open to hear other arguments, but don't tell me less government is always better, and I don't want the government in my way, and stuff like that, because you're going to see 6 months from now that the cost of streaming to your friends or customers or church or whatever you want to stream to is not going to get cheaper. It's not going to get easier. And what if they decide they don't like Netflix? Did you know that Verizon was caught throttling Netflix until net neutrality stopped them from doing it? Do you know that one of the other major services stopped FaceTime at one point, because they had a competitive service? So net neutrality is something that this group in particular, whether you're, a Democrat, Republican, or anything, you should be in favor of net neutrality.
All right, everybody that's in favor of net neutrality, after Chuck said that, raise your hand. Okay, all right. So there's the point. Let me bring about at least one counterpoint, maybe more than one. I think that internet traffic should be treated differently depending on what it is. For example, if I have a voice over IP phone system, I want my voice traffic to get priority because I don't want there to be a 10-second lag in my conversation or to hit my talk all broken up because the packets aren't flowing smoothly. So I want my voice traffic to be absolute priority. As a live streamer, I want my streaming to have priority. I don't want to have gaps in my stream. I don't want to have the circle of buffering. I want that to be prioritized. If I'm receiving an email and I get my email a minute later, that's not a big deal to me. Email is not the critical nature. And in fact, with all the spam emails I get, it would be quite okay if some of them took days to get there. So I'm okay with the internet being prioritized by the type of traffic. And I think it's important to make that distinction that that's been going on for years and years, and even went on during net neutrality, that certain types of information just got on the fast lane for whatever reason. The idea of Verizon looking out over the landscape and saying, okay, Tom Sinclair down there in Fairhope, Alabama, we don't like him, so we're going to throttle his uplink speed. Well, I don't have Verizon, so that's not a real issue for me. But what I did realize in doing a little bit of research is that in the last 2 years, with the net neutrality ruling by the Federal Communications Commission, that the investment in internet infrastructure actually took a dip. So companies were not investing in the infrastructure as they had before. What I'd rather see is those companies investing more and more in infrastructure, which means that they're getting faster and that maybe we're increasing competition. There's nothing I would like more than to see here in Little Fairhope, Alabama. We are served by AT&T if you want to get the telco service, which is really slow and you can't stream on it. We can get the cable service, which is Mediacom cable, which is pretty fast. I can get a bunch down and I can get 30 up, and 30 up is really good. But there's also a new provider coming to town, and it's going to be a point-to-point wireless provider, and they're promising 100, 200 megabit uplink speeds, and it's bringing competition to the market. So if Mediacom decides somehow they're gonna throttle me, then I'm gonna have an alternative. The other thing that I realize now is I'm already paying a difference to get better faster. Mediacom said, "Hey Tom, for $25 a month, you can get 25 down and 2 up." Well, 25 down is great if I want to watch Netflix, but if I want to live stream, 2 up doesn't work. So that was $25. And then I think there's a $50 plan and a $75 plan. And I said, hey, I want the $100 plan because I want to go really, really fast. So I'm already paying more to go faster. Now, is there somebody out there somewhere that's going to put the brakes on me because they don't like me? That may be the case. If removing the net neutrality ruling somehow makes that legal, then that's something that we need to investigate and see. My guess will be that, Chuck, as you say, it's going to be a period of time before we see the results. My other guess is that it's going to be, you've got Google and Amazon and Verizon and Netflix, and some of these companies are on the side of net neutrality, and some of these companies are on the other side. I mean, if you look at, I had a graphic, I wish I'd brought it, that kind of showed, the big guys on this side and the big guys on that side, and they were kind of fighting over the issue because each one had something to gain by their position. And it looks like, the ones that gained by having net neutrality installed in 2015 are now not gaining because the other big guys are gaining. So what we want to see is over the next 6 months, my guess it's really going to be more like a year or two to see what the difference is. My hope will be that the biggest difference will be that competition will be stirred, that if companies try to be oppressive and clamp down, that's going to provide opportunities for other companies. From what I understood of reading about the net neutrality Title II rules, that it raised the bar for new competition, for new ISPs to get into the mix. It costs them more to get into the game. What we really want to do is we want to lower the bar so this local wireless point-to-point provider can get into my little neighborhood for less money rather than more money, for less regulation rather than more regulation, because it gives me an option. Chuck, I'm going to kick it back to you with that.
If you trust Mediacom and Verizon to decide what they like or what they don't like going out on the internet, then I think that's great. I don't trust Verizon. I don't trust Spectrum. I don't trust Mediacom. I don't trust anonymous corporate people whose obligation is not to do the right thing for people. Their obligation is to try and make as much money as they can for their stockholders. That's their mantra as a corporate officer in XYZ Corporation, be it Verizon or ABC or CBS or Spectrum or Time Warner, they're not, they should be thinking about doing the right thing for people. And that's why we have government, to help us do the right thing. That's what's in the best interest of most of the people most of the time. Now, obviously, the government doesn't always do the best thing, and they certainly make mistakes, and they're capable of making mistakes. But we have the government to almost involuntarily force companies to do the right thing. It's the reason why we have, in theory, we had, the FDA or, certain parts of the government to check our food and make sure that the food we get in our markets, be it the biggest market or the smallest market, comes in and that it's relatively healthy and safe for you to eat. And the same with our drugs, and the same with our water, and the same with our air. And unfortunately, some people think that their mantra is, I don't like the government, less government is better for everything. And in this case, we're talking about net neutrality in particular. I think it does not raise the bar for companies to come in and have more competition. I have lived in, actually, by strange coincidence, after living in the same place for a long time, I've lived in 3 different locations in the last 5 or 6 years. And in each of those locations, I only had, with the exception of DirecTV as an alternate, I had one choice of where to get the internet. And DirecTV wouldn't be a very good choice for me at the time because the up speed was so slow. The down speed was fine, and I liked DirecTV when I actually had it for a while. But here, where I live in this, very nice upscale bedroom community, again, I have basically one choice of ISP, and I don't trust them to decide for them to overlook what I'm putting out on Facebook or Twitter and decide they don't like Chuck Braverman. Let's just take him off the air because maybe I've said something bad about them. I don't like that. I think we should have freedom of speech, and we should have access to everything. I love the idea that that where you live in a small, I guess I would assume, sort of semi-rural town in Alabama, that you have these 3 choices. I'm jealous, and that this point-to-point sounds great, and I would love for them to come here and have a much faster upward speed. And yes, I pay more now too, but at least I know that Spectrum can't look at my tweets and my Facebook page and say, cut this guy off because he's saying things we don't like. And without net neutrality at the moment, they can do that.
Can they really turn us off if they don't like what we say? I think that one of the things that goes on behind the scenes is that, is the government trying to regulate the internet like it was a telecom, like it was that sort of public interest utility like the telephone companies were?
Is that bad?
Well, it depends on the results. I mean, we all know about unintended consequences, and I think one of the unintended consequences of the 2015 ruling was the 18% decrease in spending on internet service providers in terms of their investment in their own product. They actually spent less in the last 2 years than they did in the years prior to that. And what I want to see is I want to see my ISP investing and spending more and making the internet faster and better. I mean, what was it? I remember reading this, it was probably 5 years ago, that said, the Koreans have internet that's like, this was 5 years ago, was 100 times faster than what we have. And I thought, yeah, obviously that was the South Koreans, not the North Koreans, but still. I was jealous. I want that. I want to have fewer restrictions, fewer whatever the restrictions are, whether they're regulations or whether they're taxes that slow down that kind of development. Now, I do agree, and I'm thankful to the government for its oversight with the food source, with medicine, with the way automobiles are manufactured, with all the regulations that have to do with that. I know it makes the bar higher for automobile manufacturers to come into that business. I mean, when was the last time we saw a new major auto manufacturer start up? I guess, maybe you could say Hyundai out in Korea, 20 years ago. But you're not going to get
you wouldn't want to go back. You wouldn't want to take away the rules of safety in cars, would you?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't want...
No. And I wouldn't want to lower the bar for entry into that market and say, okay, well, since this company's just starting out, it's okay if their cars are less safe. But on the other hand, those are things that are pretty darn serious. If we're talking about our safety, if we're talking about our health, those are things that I am delighted to have the government come in and put in needed regulation. Not because
What about
companies...
censorship, Tom? What about censorship?
I think censorship...
That's very important. You're saying you don't think Verizon or XYZ Corporation would censor you or anybody else because they didn't like what you say.
No.
I disagree with you completely. If they weren't breaking the law and if there wasn't anybody looking over their shoulder, and if you were going on the air every day and saying, I hate Verizon, their trucks are ugly, the drivers are rude, and their speed is my internet is too slow. I mean, and the guy up at Verizon is looking down at your tweets or your show or something and say, let's get this guy off the air. Can we do that? And they say, sure. There's no regulations that say we can't just cut Tom Sinclair off the air completely because we don't like him. That'll solve that problem. Boom, boom.
Well,
I don't trust them to make the right decision that's in my best interest. That's what I'm saying. And I think having net neutrality doesn't raise the bar for other ISPs to come into the market and try and
the rules did. The rules made it more difficult for an ISP to come in. Their taxes were higher. The standards that they had to meet were higher as a result.
I don't believe
that was in the minutia of the Title II portion. We can pull that out. That's a matter of record.
Studying, well, I don't see that. It's about treating people fairly. I'm just looking at examples of how Comcast secretly throttling uploads, and how the FCC ended up fining certain ISPs because they were doing things they weren't supposed to. Verizon throttled Netflix and YouTube because they could. I mean, I just
and that's really where the battle is. That's really where because that's where the money is. Because if it's all about money, which it has been in the past.
It's always all about money.
It's not about, if Chuck Braverman and Tom Sinclair decided to trash Verizon every day for 8 hours a day on their internet show, we would be not even a blip on their radar. I really don't think they would care. Because, a publicist will tell you, as long as you spell my name right, just about any publicity is publicity I like. And here's something that just drives me crazy. Here's a guy who won't even put his name on the
chat thing. Guest 904 says Chuck doesn't want choice, he wants government rule. Of course I don't want government rule, and I do want choice, but I want to have the government involved in certain things to help us make the right choices and what's in the best interest of most of the people most of the time. Otherwise, we just have anarchy. You have to have certain government regulations to protect people that can't fend for themselves.
Or stoplights. Stop signs.
Stoplights is a perfect example. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's fair. It slows everybody down, which is not a bad thing. But in the wild, wild west, which is the internet, which is virtually unregulated, it allows so many opportunities for so many people to do so many things, some of which are not good. I mean, my mailbox fills up with spammers that would like to if I will send them $300 to pay the taxes, they will send me $1 million. And it's one, what's really funny is that there was a congressman, a U.S. representative that was sucked up in one of those schemes several years ago, and he went like 3 or 4 levels deep, paying more and more and more money because he thought he was really going to get this money later on. What an idiot. But yeah, there are always going to be bad people trying to do bad things. But I don't think that Verizon, that Google, that the powers to be are going to give 2 whits about you and me. We are so far under the radar, and there's no monetary advantage to squashing us. I mean, I think that's the reality of it. Whether that's fair or unfair or should be or shouldn't be, I don't think we're not even a smidgen of a dream when they fall asleep at night. We don't even appear on their radar.
And that's the reason that they will be able to get away with doing that if they feel like it. If their teenage son tells the president of XYZ Corporation he was watching Tom Sinclair and he said something bad about your company, Daddy, next day president's going to be on the phone. You know this Tom Sinclair guy down there, and yeah, that guy, take him off. Boom. There's no consequences.
But who's he going to call?
It's just like,
who's he going to call? Is he going to call my internet provider?
Well, I'm just
Is
saying.
he going to call YouTube or Facebook?
If your ISP doesn't like you, and you have any dispute with them whatsoever, you're history. You're gone. You don't exist anymore.
I'll go to a different ISP. If they throttle me, I'll go somewhere else. I'm not tied to them. That would be great if you
have a choice. Most people don't have that choice. I guess I have to move to Southern Alabama to get multiple ISP choices.
That's right. That's right. I remember talking with somebody from California about living in Alabama, and I said, yeah, and we've got the symphony. And they said, no, you don't have symphonies in Alabama. You couldn't possibly. And I'm thinking, their view is just a bunch of rednecks in pickup trucks with shotguns, up there behind the seat. And, oh, golly.
Just like California is the land of fruits and nuts. And of course it is to some degree, but.
Yes, understood.
But we're not all crazy, I think it goes back to a very basic philosophy, which is important. And I think that the government has a responsibility and obligation to try and help us all to do the right thing more often. I mean, it's ironic that we're talking today. I don't even want to open this other can of worms that what's going on, in Washington today. But it strikes me that not everybody that's there on the public payroll is there thinking, how can I serve the people in their best interest first? That's what they're supposed to be doing. They're there to serve the people in their best interest. And I think, in my opinion, and I respect that you have a different opinion, but in my opinion, having net neutrality is in the best interest of most of the people.
I think, and I want to try to wrap this up because we've overstayed our welcome on the show, and we want to get to the post show where we can talk with some of the folks in chat. It was funny as I was thinking about, okay, Chuck's going to raise this point, and I'm going to raise that point, and then he's going to raise this one, and I'm going to raise that one. And I think the thing that you and I both can agree on, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth, is that time will tell. And a year, maybe 6 months, maybe 18 months, we will be able to see if there's a net effect to you and to me. I don't care about Netflix. I don't have Netflix. And I suspect Netflix has got enough lawyers to be able to take care of themselves if they feel like they're being throttled. And I'll tell you, everybody that has a good stake, and I'm talking about multi-million-dollar stake in a company, is going to be on the lookout for being treated unfairly, and will be raising their voice loudly, not only to their congressional representatives, but just out to the rest of the world to say, Verizon is doing that. I told you this was coming. And, I think there's no better accountability than being shamed in public. Because if Verizon gets a reputation of not playing fairly, I got a Verizon phone. I don't use them for internet, but I will hang up on them in a heartbeat if I think that they're treating people unfairly as a result of this newfound freedom. We'll see. Chuck?
I think it's a good idea that we should set a date right now, December 20th, 2018, and come back and meet here if you're still doing this show, if they haven't cut you off by then, Tom. And we should say, what is your ISP speed a year later? Is it the same? And what is your cost to get whatever that speed is?
Right.
And you're putting the word shame and politicians in the same sentence seems to be an oxymoron or something, because they've lowered the bar in Washington so far they can't go down much lower than they have.
Oh, I think we're just seeing the bar for the first time. I suspect, for the last 200 years, it's been pretty low. Oh my goodness. Well, look, Chuck, you're a real gentleman for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. I look forward to our meeting back together on December 20th, 2018. It might be over, a hand-cranked internet connection in order to do that. Will you hang on just a few minutes and
Sure.
take some questions in post-show? Okay.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for putting up with me.
Oh, no. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Okay. We're going to close out this segment, but I forgot. I forgot the most important part of the show. That's right. It's the infomercial. I mean, this show is a lot of info, but just a little bit of commercial. And here's the commercial part. Full disclosure. All this stuff that we're doing here, all this live streaming stuff, we couldn't possibly do it as well as we do without vMix. vMix is the software that makes all this happen. And so I want you to know that I am an authorized, licensed, well, probably not licensed, but at least authorized as vMix as a reseller. So if you're interested in the vMix product and you'd like to have personal attention as you begin to explore that product, you can purchase that product from me, Tom Sinclair, at easternshorebroadcasting.com and get personal lifetime tech support. And you say, Tom, what do you mean about lifetime? Well, it's lifetime, yours or mine, whichever comes first. But it does mean that you have somebody to help you get started, somebody to help you over the hump. I had a call right before we went on the show of somebody that says, Tom, they just got their license day before yesterday. And they said, can you help us get our camera installed? Well, obviously, a camera doesn't have anything to do with vMix. On the other hand, it has everything to do with vMix. So let's go outside of just the vMix bubble and say, yeah, let's get that camera hooked up to your computer the right way so vMix will see it and be able to work. And so I would encourage you, if you're thinking about vMix, think about Eastern Shore Broadcasting. We also represent Magewell, the capture card people, Marshall Electronics, the camera, that's the camera we're using today, X Keys, the PTZ, the PI Engineering folks. We love our X Keys, and we have a bunch of those in stock. Actually, I'm pointing to the shelf over there where we keep them. And also to the folks at PTZ Optics, where we are selling the tar out of some PTZ cameras. People are finding more and more uses for those amazing little cameras. And coming up January 3rd, I think that's the date, the NDI upgrade for those cameras will be released. You can buy the upgrade today for $300. If you have a Gen 2 camera, you can buy the upgrade for $300. January 4th, that upgrade will cost you $600. So if you're interested in that, shoot me a note, easternshorebroadcasting.com. There's a note form there, or you can just put Tom at in front of it and send me an email. and get signed up for that and save 50%. NDI, we'll talk about NDI. You need to know about NDI. It's amazing. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to go to post-show, so if you're watching us after the fact on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching us after the fact on Facebook or Periscope or Twitter, you got to watch the show live, man. Come on, 3 o'clock Eastern time, easternshorebroadcasting.com. We'd love to have you. Take care, and we will see you next week. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Rookie mistake. Chuck, you know what I forgot to do? Oh, hold on. I got to turn Chuck back on here. I forgot to record this.
Oh, no.
Oh, my goodness. That is so great. I love it. Fortunately, of course, YouTube records it and Facebook records it and Twitter records it. So I'll go see which one of those recordings is the best. And then I'll just chop it down to just the show portion.
I thought you were going to say we have to do it all over again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I've done that before. That's no fun. It takes the spontaneity out of it to do it, in 5 takes. Okay, let's see. If anybody's got questions they want to pose to Chuck or pose to me, and these have got to be real questions, not questions like, Chuck, why do you believe that pigs will fly? That's not a fair question. So give us some good questions, and we could just sort of, debate them back and forth among ourselves, or folks may have. All right, Rich says, if we wanted to open the marketplace and get unregulated, we would need to lift restrictions on new construction of broadband service, free up leasing rights to existing wired infrastructure, and remove protectionist policies that help telecom companies stay the monopoly or duopoly that they are. Now, this is Rich. This is the one that said he was neutral earlier. So it's not really a question. It's sort of a statement. Chuck, do you think that's true?
Well, I'm all for competition. I think everybody should be able to get into the marketplace, and I don't think net neutrality stops people from coming in the marketplace. It just forces them to treat people fairly. That's all. And I don't think we should have a monopoly. I'd like to have 3 or 4 choices, for sure. I've watched my cable bill creep up and up and up and up and up. I mean, and they don't send you a note and say, we're raising the cable bill this month by $4. But I at one point I get my phone, my internet, and the television all from one source. Uh-huh. So it's hard to tell even what I'm paying for one or the other. But it's, I pay a lot of money for it now. And I would love to have competition here. Yeah, bring it on. Let's have some competition.
Good.
Every business treats customers better the more you pay. Eliminate net neutrality is good based on Chuck's statement just now.
There's a little bit of a delay between the time we see them say something and the time that we had said whatever they might be saying. So sometimes it's a little hard, although there's probably not that much delay. And it depends on whether they're watching Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube as to how much delay there is. We would assume that everybody in the chat room is watching YouTube, which has about an 8 to 10 second delay. I'm not sure what it is today.
You see this guy, John Thompson, it says in the UK they have hundreds of ISP choices. I mean, that's sort of shocking. If they have hundreds, I bet you they pay a heck of a lot less than what we pay.
Hundreds?
You see John Thompson says only 3 or 4 choices. We've probably got a choice of hundreds of ISPs in the UK. So
he's
John,
exaggerating.
Well, okay, whatever it is,
hundreds.
Where we live, your choice is determined by the geography of where you live, because this was originally all about hardwired. It came in the hardwired through the
Right.
telephone companies originally.
Right.
So that's why net neutrality is so important, because most people don't have choices. You can't, if you don't like the market, we have 4 or 5 different major markets in this area. And if Trader Joe's is more expensive than Ralph's, then you can go to Ralph's. And if you don't like the meat at Ralph's, you can go to Sprouts and get the vegetables there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We have those choices, and that's what that is competitive. I'm in favor of competition and more choices. Yes, but net neutrality is so important in so many ways, not just to stop the throttling, but again, this potential, this idea, if they don't like what you're saying, they could cut you off. Or if they don't like Apple FaceTime because they're sponsored by Microsoft or Android or something like that, they could just stop FaceTime.
Well,
or what if they don't like YouTube?
Well, aren't we really talking about trade? I mean, aren't we really talking about something that should be under the auspices of the Federal Trade Commission? Because these are unfair trading practices?
Well, again, like, I'm not an expert in government, and the only thing I'm really an expert at, I think, is in documentary filmmaking. And but I do read several newspapers every day, and I think the FCC is supposed to be a non-political, objective branch that has the best interests of the people at heart. And the FCC, came about back in the days of radio to regulate the airwaves, which are owned by the public. Now, in this case, of course, the ISPs, you could argue, yes, the telephone company and the ISPs spent a lot of money laying copper wire or fiber wire or whatever they were putting to get, and then that last mile, so on and so forth. But it's become a utility. It's become something that everybody has to have now. If you don't have, think about it. If you don't have internet, I can't say the expression I would like to say because this is a family program, but internet is important, right? It's become an absolute necessity. My wife and I went away on a vacation this week for the first time in umpteen years, in the mountains near here, in a place called Idlewild, which is a beautiful little mountain town with cabins and all that. And they have internet in the cabins, of course. And when the internet stopped, it's like, you get the shakes a little bit because even though you want to go to the mountains to get away from everything, you don't want to be completely cut off from the world.
So you say, yeah.
Right.
Yep. And I remember when all I had was dial-up, and boy, that was a long time ago, and getting a solid connection with probably what was DSL was such a luxury. It was like, to move from this technology that was just, slower than molasses to this new technology that was, high speed. It was wonderful. It was an advance, and I could do more, and I could enjoy more and download movies and do all that kind of stuff. And then as, I was able to kind of progress up the ladder and get faster and faster and faster, it was like, more and more and more and more. And now, now it's to the point, at least for family-wise, where, 100 megs down is, 10 times what we need. But from a business standpoint, it's that uplink speed that continues to be the uneven one, 100 down, but only 30 up, when really I'd like 300 up. But the thought that once that leaves me, that it's going to go through a metering device or a gate or something where somebody's going to be able to constrict it and say, okay, everybody that is streaming live to Facebook is going to get constricted because we don't like Facebook. I could see that something like that could possibly happen. But I think that's going to be a trade practice, not a communication practice, and would be the kind of thing that the Federal Trade Commission would look up and say that's an unfair trade practice. You used the analogy a while back of Walmart being able to have a fast track on the interstate, and actually I think in some ways almost the opposite is true in that particular environment. That Walmart pays thousands of dollars a year in taxes to be able to put that truck on the road, whereas you and I in our cars, we might pay 25 cents a gallon extra, and so if I'm going to use 500 gallons a year, I guess maybe I'm paying a couple $1,000s, whatever the math is on that. But they're paying access fees. Every time they buy tires, there's taxes involved. Fuel, there's taxes involved, all to go to pay for those infrastructures. So I think their costs are actually higher in that sense, and that would be appropriate because they're using up more of it. I mean, that is, if you've ever been down one of those old interstate roads where you could literally see the grooves from the 18-wheeler tires because they'd worn the road so much.
But Tom, you don't believe for a second that the Walmart trucks, because they're the first or second biggest corporation, I think, in the country, should they have their own lane, and should they be able to go 80 miles an hour on the highway when the speed limit is 60?
Do I believe that? No.
Okay.
No, I think actually the opposite.
Because they pay more taxes because they're a giant, bigger corporation, but they're making a ton of money, right? There's no shortage of money that they're making, and good for them. They let them make a ton of money. That's fine if they provide a good service for us. I mean, it's just like, you don't. To me, I just have a hard time. This group of streaming idiots should want more than anybody to be allowed to have net neutrality, because they want that upload speed. They want to be able to stream, and if their ISP is going to throttle them or charge them more, it's going to be a hardship for them. And thank you, Jim Moline. You remember American Time Capsule. You're aging yourself and saying how old you are by remembering that. But you disagree with me on the internet was just fine before the government got involved. What did the government get involved in? What did the government do to get involved in the internet? I don't know. What did they do? Individual abuses can be dealt with legal procedure set without the government setting rules. Well, I don't know. I think we have to have some rules of something,
I'll tell you.
Help us do the right thing.
I'll tell you, Chuck, I am in favor of somebody saying you've got to treat everybody fairly. But there's a difference between fairly and equally. Because going back to my voice over IP thing, I don't want my voice over IP data packet to be treated exactly the same as my email packet. I want that to have priority. I want my stream to have priority. And that's the way it is now, and I think that's the way it was under net neutrality, and I think that's the way it was prior to net neutrality. But we just had these kind of high profile things that happened that somebody said, okay, well, the government's got to go in and force people to play fair. And then what happened was there was an unintended consequence. And I think, if you've ever been through when I was living in the state of Florida, I was living in Tallahassee, which was the state capital, and the nonprofit association I was working for was lobbying the state legislature for certain laws. And once a law was passed, then the rulemaking process would come about, where the law said, we're going to do this, and then the rulemaking process would say, okay, this is how we're going to implement the law. And what happened with the 2015 ruling is all of a sudden there were unintended, I think perhaps unintended consequences, which going back to raising the bar and making it more difficult for there to be competition among ISPs, i.e., it costs more to get started. There was more regulation involved.
But what in net neutrality is costing more to get started,
but that was the consequence of that 2015 ruling. Is these kind of rules came into place to say, okay, we're going to restrict this. We're going to make it harder to be an ISP, and that's why we saw the decrease, the 18% decrease in spending on infrastructure in the internet over those 2 years, because
I'd like
people
to see
couldn't
that.
get into it.
I don't really buy that. To me, it goes back to this basic philosophy, which is really big and important. The fact that the government now is pro-business and pro-corporate and not pro-people. Those guys that are there on our salary should be working for us and not having their 3 martini lunch with their lobbyists who are giving them big checks for their campaigns, and they're working for the lobbyists who are writing the statutes today. That's the problem.
But there's no change in that. That has been that way since you and I were in diapers.
Well, one way to change that is you don't allow politicians, anybody who's been a politician, become a lobbyist for a reasonable length of time. That thing has been happening, which is really bad. And
term limits. That would be the other way to get rid of that.
I think term limits is a great idea. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that Democrat that they just kicked out, been there for 57 years or something.
Conyers.
50 years. He'd been, it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, whatever. Nobody should be a congressman for 50 years. It's ridiculous.
But all right, let's go down that little rabbit trail for a second, because I've done some thinking on this one. So we do term limits. We say, okay, every congressman is limited to 5 terms, which would be 10 years, and each senator is limited to let's just say 3 years, 3 terms, which would be 18 years. And so what happens is the continuity that these longer term guys provide now gets transferred from this long-term senator. We've got Senator Shelby, who's been, I don't know, he's been senator from Alabama for, I'd bet, 20 years. Now, if he is forced to retire and somebody else comes in that's new, I think what happens is the clout that he has, instead of it passing to the next guy, it passes to his staffers who end up working for the next guy. And so you have this staff that works for 40 years as Senate staff, and they are the ones that end up with all the power and all the connections and the ability to pull all the strings, and they aren't even elected. I think there's an unintended consequence to term limits. I don't know that that's true, but it would be interesting to somehow set up a test case and see if that worked.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I don't know whether it's true or not either, but I would think that if you have a new congressman or senator come in, that they would bring in a lot of new people, fresh blood, new ideas, and instead of having the same.
Come on. Now, Chuck, that's not true. If you go in to do a documentary, you want to get the camera guys that do good work. You want to get the audio guys that do work. You don't want to bring in some intern and somebody that just graduated and said, "Here, take over and do all my cameras." No, I want known quantities. I want people that I know can perform. And if I'm a senator or a congressman, I'm going and getting the best guys that the previous guy had, because they know where all the bodies are buried.
That's true.
All right, let's go back to net neutrality. That one wasn't any fun. All right, Jan, who is a Dane living in Sweden, or is he Swedish living in Denmark? I get it confused. Anyway, Jan says that his new apartment, came with the choice of like a dozen different internet providers, and that it was built into his rent. and that it was so cheap it was just a commodity like water or electricity. That's one thing, but that's really not what we're talking about. I mean, that's great competition among ISPs, and it gives us. But if somebody decides that the Tom and Chuck show that goes to YouTube needs to be throttled, in fact, all of YouTube needs to be throttled, that doesn't have anything to do with my ISP. Because I'm sending it to YouTube, but when YouTube is sending it to the rest of the world to be viewed,
Well, it depends. It depends
that's
on
when it
who
gets
makes
constricted.
it depends on who makes that decision, and I think this has to do with ISPs more than it has. It doesn't have anything to do with YouTube. It's the ISP deciding. Look, somebody on the chat board wrote something about Comcast, which is the major ISP, and they happen to own NBC Universal. Well, if they start throttling their competitors, I mean, what's to stop them from throttling their competitors? Because everything is going on the internet right now, practically, right? Actually, in my office here, I used to have a big television set back there, and now I suddenly realized I don't have to have a television set back there because I can have it right here on my second screen that's built in my app, and I'm just too lazy to have returned the cable box, which is probably costing me $10 a month to rent, which is just sitting there sucking up electricity. But if my ISP doesn't like whatever channel, they can start throttling. I mean, as they did, can you imagine? They did to Netflix. They're throttling, and Netflix. Do you know that I think more people are watching Netflix now than are watching NBC, CBS, or ABC, probably combined. And I'm certainly one of those people too. I watch Netflix. I watch Amazon Prime. My Hulu is coming up, and and the other thing which I didn't even get a chance to say is my good friend Richard Proper, who did the original Westock conference with me, is trying to start. I mean, here's a great entrepreneurial story. There's an individual guy is trying to start an OTT channel, right? And for those of you who don't know, which you should on this broadcast, OTT means over the top, and the most obvious example of an OTT channel is Netflix, but that they're so big. But you can have an OTT channel that's much smaller, and I'm not going to tell you what the content is. I'm going to let him tell when he's ready to tell. But he's trying to start 2 or 3 OTT channels, and he's trying to raise money to do that. And this is not $100 million deal. It's a $1 million or $2 million deal or whatever he needs, where he's trying to raise his money. And it would be sensational. He has a great idea and he's got great content. But if he can't get equal access over the air, over the, not the air, what would you call it? Over the Ethernet, over the ether, he and many, many others who want to start competing OTT channels will be at a huge disadvantage. That's why net neutrality is so important. And I think it's extremely important for Eastern Shore Broadcasting that net neutrality, that there isn't somebody that you don't even know who it is that decides that they don't like you, and they decide, the heck with him, or let's just throttle him, let's just dial him down a little bit by little bit by little bit. And where are you going to go? Who are you going to complain to? That the guy behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz isn't there?
Well, then maybe we need to make that illegal.
That's what net neutrality was. That's why they had net neutrality.
But net neutrality was other things too. That's my objection, is that the rule-making process provided for barriers that were not necessary to your concept of net neutrality. If you go to WikiLeaks, or Wikipedia, not WikiLeaks, and you look at what the definition of net neutrality is, it doesn't say anything about barriers or taxes or making it more difficult. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. That is the net neutrality concept, yes. But the 2015 FCC ruling and the rules that were propagated as a result of that ruling had the effect of restricting entry to ISPs and reducing the investment that current ISPs made by almost 20%. I mean, that's if you Google net neutrality 18% reduction, you'll pull up article after article after article to show about that. And I think it was not only an unintended consequence in some ways, it was somebody intended it to be a consequence. They wanted to restrict competition. And the only people that I can think of that would want to restrict competition would be people like Comcast, people like Verizon, that don't want more ISPs getting into the pot because it makes it, it dilutes their market share. And I think, it was a good sounding idea. Yes, let's treat everybody equally. Again, I'd rather say fairly than equally, but the unintended consequence was somebody got into the rules and they boogered up the rules and meant that people were not treated the same or fairly, either way. And that suddenly the bar was raised and people, when I say people, I mean businesses that would like to do internet service providing, were restricted to do that. If somebody knows that article and could put a link to any number of sources for it in the chat, that would be
I
really
actually did Google that as you were speaking, and that's not what came up at all. But I'd like to see that article. I'd like to see that. And if what you say is in fact true, and not something that you saw on Fox, then I would be happy to discuss that with you.
I saw on Fox.
Well, that's the other problem. I mean,
your prejudice is showing through, Chuck. Come on.
It's not prejudice. It's fact. I mean, and on the other side, is MSNBC. And what I say is, if you watch Fox, you should turn on MSNBC for a few days and watch it, and vice versa. I
do both.
My closest friend from junior high school moved away from L.A. area during high school, and he moved to somewhere in Michigan. And we reconnected recently on Facebook and became, I can see pictures of his family and vice versa and so on. And he became this. Oh man, I don't even want to open this can of worms. But let me put it this way: we just don't agree on anything outside of you have a lovely family, and I hope you're happy and healthy. But I did say, what does it say? Only if you watch MSC, Chuck. When has Fox lied? Please provide. Oh my God! Don't start that. Come on, are you kidding me? You have to switch channels and watch. It's like if you don't agree with something, you've got to go see what the other side is saying. You've got to watch. I mean, to watch Rachel any night on MSNBC, and watch her for a couple of nights and see what she says. And
I can only take her in short bursts.
Well, but take a few bursts. And,
I do.
See what
I want to
says.
see what she's. I know what the conservatives are saying. I want to see what the libs are saying about the same subject, and to see how the spin's different, because.
And let's just say for
anything that we
argument,
see is going to be a spin, regardless of which side we're watching. It's being spun.
I think that most of the major networks, excluding, let's say, one far right and one left. Let's eliminate those two.
Okay.
And let's say, for the sake of argument, that CNN is in the middle, because I think that they try to be objective journalists, and you're laughing, and people are saying that CNN is fake news. Well, I mean, they aren't fake news. That's that's ridiculous, and this is the argument we really didn't want to get into.
Right.
But
But that's okay. We can get into it
friend,
because you and I have agreed that we're going to continue to respect each other and be friends after this is over. So we can disagree.
Absolutely. So anyway, I would strongly recommend that those of you who disagree with the way I feel is that you watch the other side for a few nights and just get a feel for what they're saying on the other side of the fence. Because if you watch Fox News all the time, it actually it's been proven by scientists to warp your brain completely. And
And you saw that on CNN, I'm sure. Okay, I got you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Chuck Braverman, I really like you. I really like you. It really was one of the highlights of my NAB experience last April in Las Vegas to meet you and some of your running buddies there at the vMix booth.
well, I'm so glad we did. It was the highlight for me too, to discover you and vMix. And uh, I'm I think it's I don't know that many people from Alabama to begin with. I don't know if I know anybody from Alabama outside of you. And I can't wait to come down there sometime and have lunch with you or something like that, or vice versa if you're out here.
We've got this incredible thing that happens down here, and we're going to go way off track on this one. But we're right on the bay. We're right on Mobile Bay, which opens into the Gulf of Mexico. And Mobile Bay is a wonderful estuary for all sorts of sea creatures. And we have shrimp, and we have flounder, and we have, we don't have lobster, but we have lots of great stuff. And there's something called a jubilee that happens in Mobile Bay. It only happens a couple places around the world, where sometimes the oxygen level in the water just drops dramatically. And so all this sea life just makes a mad dash for the shore. I mean, giant flounders will beach themselves. Shrimp will just be piling up on the side of the water on the shoreline. And, everybody gets on the phone and calls their friends and say, bring your ice chest. And they'll fill up giant coolers of flounder and shrimp and sea trout and, all sorts of wonderful sea creatures that you can cook and eat. And it's an amazing phenomenon. And to see one of those, you'll be amazed. And that's the kind of
fish
stuff that
just jump right out of the ocean into the cooler for you, practically.
almost. I mean, they will land themselves and just to get out of the water because they can't.
Well,
for some reason they can't breathe or something. It's amazing.
Total change of subject, but I'm looking at the chat thing here, and somebody named John L. Why he asked, I have no idea, but he said, Chuck, have you seem like you would like Europe. Have you ever been to Europe or something like that? And by coincidence, I was in Europe about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. I was invited to teach a class in Moldova, which is a small Eastern European country between the Ukraine and Romania, which I didn't really know anything about before I went. So I spent a week in Moldova before I went to Ireland. And the point that I'm getting at is that Moldova, which is the poorest country in all of Europe, and the average monthly wage, I was told, and I think if you go online you can read this, the average monthly wage is the equivalent of 300 American dollars per month. And so I was teaching these 20-somethings, these recent school grads, documentary filmmaking, and they managed to, have cell phones and have some cameras and try and get by. But the thing that sticks in my mind, because this country is kind of like back in time for the most part, a lot, and they're a poor country, but I stayed in this hotel in Chichnya, in the capital of Moldova, and this motel in the room had cable TV or something, and it had a guide of the channel guide that you opened up, and it was 2 pages. They literally had about 400 channels on the channel guide in Moldova, in the hotel. half of them were, well, maybe not half, but almost half were Russian, because they're Moldova is stuck between East and West, and I think they're being pushed and pulled between the East and the West. And so there's a lot of Russian and Romanian influence there. But it was shocking to me to be in this place that you've never heard of, really, basically, right? And in this upscale hotel, that they had 400 channels and included CNN, BBC, and maybe dozen. Oh, they had the European versions of A&E and Lifetime or whatever some of the other channels were. But there were more choices in that television that I've ever seen in any hotel room anywhere, whatever that's worth.
Were they HD?
Oh yes, oh yes. This was a nice big, like a 45 or 50-inch
Oh,
flat screen
oh wow.
HD television. Yeah,
In
yeah.
Moldova. I'll be darned.
In Moldova, in Chisinau, Moldova. Um, so I don't know. The internet, and they had internet there, and so you know, I don't know what you do without internet. I'd like be like a shaking, like I
Yeah,
said.
that's right. You'd have to have some satellite connection somehow. The person that was asking that question is Jan, who is the Dane living in Sweden, who has multiple internet choices as just part of his rent. He did say he has to pay for water and electricity, and perhaps he has to pay for internet too. But for them, it's not that much. It really is amazing that there can be such a disparity. And I think anything that we can do to encourage more competition is a good thing. It's a
I mean,
good
look at
thing.
his Jan's latest post, and that what the average wage is there in Sweden. They get 100 up and down, which is like I would like that. I get actually where I live. I think I get 200 down and 20 up. They throttle it. You can tell they throttle it for whatever
Right.
reason. The up speed is much slower. I'd like to have that fast. And he says it costs $25. I mean, my bill for TV, internet, and phone, I think is $264 a month, which is, if I was in Moldova, that would leave me, $12 a month for food.
Yes, yes. That's kind of what my son is finding in Thailand is that his salary of 3,000 baht a month leaves him 2,500 baht to play with because living expenses are so low.
But what is it worth?
Oh, about 30 cents or something like that, or 50 cents or not much, not much. He went on a
Chris
junket
says he
for a
has.
weekend and it cost him 100 baht. I was like, oh
Oh,
my gosh.
yes, anything to encourage competition, I think is good, as long as I'm really not a huge Spike Lee fan, but he made a movie with the title "Do the Right Thing," and I think that's a good mantra for just about anybody for almost anything. Do the right thing, and it's unfortunate that our large and small corporations don't have that mantra. Do the right thing all the time. The fact that you know uh, Volkswagen made how many hundreds of thousands of vehicles with by gaming the system and thinking cheating, and not only did they cheat the system, but they made the exhaust was 20 times worse than it would have been if they had just done it right. And of course it ended up costing them
Billions.
billions of dollars in
Yep.
the end, and hurt their brand, uh you know you know
Yep.
beyond that. But I mean, how can you be sitting in that room with the 10 guys? I say guys, I assume it was my
Probably
prejudiced
was.
way. Probably 10 guys sitting in a room saying, yeah, we could save $12 per car if we gamed the system. You multiply that times 8 million cars. That's
Yeah.
a lot of money. And so what if it poisons the air and we're cheating? Like, how could they get away with that? How do they do that? And how many people have gone to jail for that? I don't think anybody has. So
Well, they didn't get away with it, but they probably didn't go to jail for it. Yeah.
they almost got away with it. It was just some little college in Virginia or somewhere that stumbled upon, they were doing research and they discovered it by accident, right?
Yep. I think that was the case. Yeah. Okay. Chris says it's not cheating, it's alternative engineering.
I don't know, why are we laughing? Chuck, the Volkswagen deal wasn't saving per car; it was meeting government regulations. No,
Well, it doesn't matter.
Ryan,
The net
come
effect
on.
was.
It wasn't. It was in immense stupidity, and it was poisoning the air. It's not just meeting government regulations. They were trying to make it safe for us to breathe the air, so you and your family and your children could, not get lung cancer every time a Volkswagen goes by.
Yeah, hang on just a second. Byron, bring it down a little bit. Bring it down a little bit. Byron is a close friend, so I can do that. He also knows this is my sandbox, and I can throw his butt out.
See, just like
I can throttle him.
ISP,
That's right.
you could more than throttle him.
That's right. That's right. But
and we find out that Tom is his own ISP, right?
That's right. There's no neutrality here. If I don't like it, it's gone. But is this a freedom of speech forum? No, because this is not a public location. I could walk outside and have my freedom of speech, but right here, this is my sandbox. What I say goes. Now, I'm generally not that obvious about my motivation and intention. I try to make people feel that they're welcome and that they can say anything they want to as long as I agree with it. And that this is a good place to be. But occasionally we have to spank people and tell them, don't misbehave. The Tom Neutrality Show, that's right.
I like Michael Rempel's comment. He says, when bad stuff happens, at least we can make a documentary. That's right. If there wasn't bad stuff happening, I'd be out of business.
Michael was on the show several weeks ago. He's the audio professor.
Wow.
So he was talking audio theory that just left me in the dust. It was amazing.
My son, if anybody needs an audio mix, Max Braverman has a studio and is a really fantastic audio mixer. I'll put a plug in for maxbraverman.com. If you need audio mixing, he has every bell and whistle, every tool. He uses the latest version of Pro Tools 5.1 surround, and he saved our butts on all this audio that we had from these old recordings on a documentary he made a couple of years ago, and was able to clean them up amazing.
Wow. All right. That's a talent and an art. Yeah.
It is. I can't imagine how he's also a musician, so he can do things that I can't do. He plays he's a graduate of Berklee College of Music, and he plays guitar and bass and drums and keyboard and writes and produces music. And then he got into all this audio stuff, and I asked him if he could, mix some shows, and he learned mix shows and now he's doing feature films and feature documentaries and commercials. And I'm very proud of my kids. I brag about them all the time if I can.
maxbraverman.com. Got it. And Byron says he's got to leave. So Byron, don't leave angry. Just leave. I'm teasing, of course.
Moldova has faster mobile internet than the U.S. has, according to Martin.
Wow. Martin is in Switzerland. And Martin is actually...
That's embarrassing. That's in this country. Why? How we're supposed to be... We keep hearing that we're the greatest and the biggest and the best and all that. Why don't we have the best, fastest, cheapest, most fantastic internet of all time? Let's make our internet great again.
It never was great. That's the thing. It's not like we're recovering something. We're just pushing for. But Chuck, I think good years are ahead of us. I really do. I'm really excited about what I see. The whole again, my little neck of the woods. Competition is a good thing. you know, you say kind of, you know, you imagine us as in this rural area. And, you know, compared to where you live, we might be considered rural. I mean, our little county here, Baldwin County, Alabama, has a population of 100,000. So that's pretty good size.
My area, the area that I live in, is probably not that different from where you live, actually, except for the fact that I'm now 45 minutes or an hour away from LA,
Right.
where I grew up, and where I love LA, except they allowed too many cars there, and it's just become a big parking lot now.
Well,
As a matter of
now
fact,
I can commiserate. I mean, you know, in Fairhope, we now have, I think we're up to 9 stoplights. And the other day, I had to sit all the way through a red light. I mean, all the way through a green light because the traffic was so backed up. I couldn't get through the first time. It was terrible. Oh, it was awful.
you joke. You
I'm
joke
serious.
about that. But that's my biggest pet peeve in this area, is that they don't have the stoplights timed.
Synchronized. Yeah.
They say they do, and sometimes you get a green light, but I think there's a helicopter going over and says, "Chuck's approaching that intersection, make it red now."
Yeah,
But
that's right. It's GPS.
but what they
yeah.
do have here, which I'm just amazed and I love for Southern California, there's free parking here everywhere. There's no parking meters in town. There's not a parking meter. You can go to any mall. There's a big mall a mile down the road, a huge mall. And in LA, you're going to take a ticket and pay, you know, maybe you get an hour free or something. Here, it's all free parking. You go to the doctor, it's free parking. You go to anywhere you go, it's free parking.
People have to
You
pay to
probably
park. That's terrible. Oh my goodness. There ought to be laws against that.
Yeah, that should be.
Gee
I
whiz.
agree.
Oh man. Well, yeah. I guess it's a different world here than there. Yep.
Yeah, it's a car thing now. It's cars.
Our little
That's gonna
town,
change too.
they did a study in our little town. Well, they did a study somewhere else and brought it to our little town. And they decided that by making the streets essentially narrower, it slows down the traffic. And so they put in all sorts of on the street parking that hadn't been as prevalent before. And they put, you know, kind of a border down the middle to make the lanes narrower. And doggone if it didn't work. And so now all the cars that come through town, you know, they're going 15, 20 miles an hour instead of rolling through at 35. And it makes the downtown area so much more pleasant and so much more friendly, because it's just like, you know, it's a community where, you know, there's a parade of cars and not a interstate of cars. Our little
But
town
if
is
you ride a
known for...
bicycle, that's not good,
Actually, there's a bike
right?
path too. Yeah, there's a bike path too.
Well,
So
that's
there's
good, because I used
that's
to
all
ride a
part
bike
of
a
the...
lot in this street. Yeah, yeah.
And you know, our city has got these trash cans all throughout downtown. And about, I don't know, about 15 years ago, somebody objected to the trash cans. So the city went out and put flower boxes on all the trash cans and won an award for beautification. And so now that's a big part of the city. You know, if you go through downtown, there are all these different flower areas, including the flower boxes on top of the trash cans. It's cool. It's cool. Well, Chuck, I think it's time for us to pull the plug if we're talking about trash and flowers and parking. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time out to come on the show. And I've got it here on my date book for December 20th, 2018 for us to...
I'm going to put it in my calendar, my electronic calendar, which is...
Yep.
It's been my pleasure, Tom. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we met at NAB, and I'm going to go back to NAB this coming year, hopefully. And
make sure you're there for Tuesday.
Is that what's happening on
Tuesday night? Tuesday night at NAB is the Streaming Idiots meetup.
Oh, okay, good. Tuesday night.
And we will either do it at Scott Whitney's studio, or Scott is building a live streaming studio at one of the casinos. And we're kind of hoping that we might be able to use that for our meetup. And last year we had, beer and wine and soft drinks and shrimp and all sorts of other stuff. And we had some great giveaways. And I think we had about 30 folks there. I'm anticipating a few more this year. And some good sponsors. And so it was a lot of fun event. And it just, purely social and a chance to, here's the big benefit. It's a chance to meet these people in the chat room that you're seeing. A significant number of them will be at NAB. And, it's a chance where we finally get to meet and press the flesh and look eye to eye and have a great chance to chat.
I love I love what you're doing, Tom, and I love the idea of streaming and the fact that an individual like you or me can put together their own show and put it out on the internet, and in potentially it can be seen all over the world by an unlimited number of people if it doesn't get throttled.
Well, I'll tell you what, that would be the ultimate compliment. Yeah.
Anybody that's still watching this, if they want to go to the Weststock Online website and give me some feedback on the website, or you can watch the first show down there. I'd love to know what you think, you streamers. I'm just, like I said, I'm a professional filmmaker, but I'm a newbie when it comes to streaming. And I like the idea of people sitting at their desktop and doing it on a webcam instead of having to set up a camera. And it's a lot easier that way too. So
when's your next show?
As we go. Tuesday, January the 9th. I think we're going to be doing a show about distribution. I haven't decided whether I'm going to stick with that topic or not, because that's the beginning of when I'm going to be doing it every other Tuesday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. But the next show is going to be more interesting. January 23rd is the day of the Academy Award nominations, and that happens at 5:30 usually in the morning Pacific time. At 9:30 in the morning, I'm going to have on my show 3 or 4 or 5 nominees from that day of documentary feature or documentary short. I hope. That's the plan. We'll see, which I think will be really exciting because it's life-changing. It's really incredible to get nominated for an Academy Award, and it's a big day.
All right.
So I hope you guys will come around and watch the show. Anybody that's left, whether you're in Switzerland or Alabama or wherever, I want you to come watch the show.
Before the show, the day before the show, come into Streaming Idiots group in Facebook and post a reminder with a link so that we'll have it right there. Are you going to stream it to Facebook?
Yes.
Okay.
But I didn't even open this subject. Maybe anybody who's watching, I started a YouTube channel and I was flagged for community standards before I posted anything on YouTube, and I immediately appealed. This was a month ago, and my channel is still restricted, and I can't for the life of me. There's nobody to call. There's nothing
I talked to somebody at YouTube about that. And because you had put a note out there, and I called one of my YouTube buddies, and they said that they had gotten a call from Verizon, and Verizon said to block your channel.
That's what we're talking about here, Tom.
Oh. They just knew you were a troublemaker, and they said, we're not having any of this.
I was coming to town, and they throttled me before I could open my big mouth.
Oh, that happens to the best of us. It really does. Sooner or later, it's somebody else's sandbox.
If I had done something or said something, okay, you didn't like it, but it's hard to violate community standards before you do anything.
Your existence.
I'd like violates. I want to violate community standards when I'm ready to violate community standards.
I understand. Well, don't forget to let us know in Facebook when the shows are. And I'll tell you one thing that definitely has helped me when the time comes for you is to do a show on a regular schedule. so that people have got it on their calendar, that they know that on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, or whatever it is, that you're going to be there and you've got something interesting to say, and you'll develop a loyal following. And a community.
The other thing I agree, and that's why I'm trying to do it every other Tuesday morning. But what I've learned, of course, is despite the fact that I've tried to set it up in a way that's easy, it's a huge commitment of time to set up a show, and then
absolutely
all the other peripheral things that I'm doing from scratch, starting a website, trying to figure out how to get sponsors that are interested, and it all goes down to eyeballs. I mean,
yes.
How do you get people to find you? And I produced a live conference, and so I know the players in this game, and I know who people want to see and all that. But how do you get people to know that you're even out there and exist? So if anybody knows any whizzes of SEO or Facebook or social media whizzes, I'm looking for somebody to help me. By the way, a social media whiz bang is the title, I think.
Good. Well, they'll be in contact with you. I have a feeling. Yep, they've got your website, so they know how to get you. And this show, is seen by hundreds of thousands of people, and YouTube just lies about the numbers every week. Really, they've got. Never mind. I was going to say something nasty. I'm not going to say that. Anyway, all right, Chuck, you're a champ. Thank you, and thanks to all of you guys that are still hanging out with us in the chat. Amnon says, what did Amnon say? Amnon has his own studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. He says, Chuck, there are others. YouTube is not the only place to stream to. Amnon has a studio where I think he produces somewhere between 5 and 10 shows a week. And his website, it's nissancommunications.com. If you go to nissancommunications.com and go on the show page, it'll show the player, and on top of the player are 4 or 5 different buttons. And if the live stream is not doing well, you click one of those buttons and it automatically switches to a different CDN. And so he's got 4 or 5, and he's streaming to all of these CDNs at the same time. So if one of them craps out, and they're all free, if one of them craps out, you just click the button and go to the next one.
Is that NISSAN?
NISSAN Communications.
2 S's.
.com. Nissan like the car. Yep.
Okay.
And if you're ever in Raleigh, you need to look him up. He's a good guy. Yep. Yep.
Okay, my friend. Thank you, sir. Really
Very
was
good.
a pleasure, and I'll see you before December 20th next year, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. And we are, for Kenny was asking about next week. Yes, we're going to have a show next week, 27th. Will be our 2018 prediction show. I've invited several folks to come on and give their predictions, since obviously my predictions from last year were so awful. I predicted that Facebook Live would be a flop, that it would be gone within 3 months. Boy, did I miss that one by a mile. But that's okay. I had a couple other predictions that I got spot on, so there you go. December 27th, we're having a show. It'll be fun. Chuck, thank you, sir. We'll catch you later. And those of you watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.